Now to get started, again as before, attached you find a starting project which you can download, run npm install in there in the downloaded and extracted folder, and once you installed all the dependencies with npm install, you can start that development server with npm run serve. So basically what we did all the time throughout the last modules as well. Now we got a huge project to build, and as you can imagine, we'll also use a couple of components to build this project. Because, and I want to really emphasize this here, because that is what Vue and Vue projects are all about, you could say. You want to build a user interface by combining multiple components. And every component has its clearly defined job. The job could be to just look good and provide a certain styling and just output some information, or the job could be to fetch some user input, show a warning if that input is invalid, or otherwise use that input to generate some data. And we're going to see all those different kinds of components in action in this module here. Now, how do we get started with this kind of project? Well, you might remember the Monster Slayer project we built earlier in this course. And there I also just got started step by step by adding feature after feature. And I want to do the same thing here, and we can always split our code into more components when we got a feeling that a component is getting too big and we might want to split it up. Because that will also be an important part of writing Vue code, that you from time to time re-evaluate the code and split it into smaller pieces to keep it manageable. But with that, enough of the talking. I'll start by adding a components folder in the source folder, because we will need that, and in the source folder, not in the components folder, but in the source folder, I'll also add an app Vue file, because we'll definitely need that root component, that root Vue application that will hold all our other components in the end. Well, and then I'm going to start by adding a template here in app Vue. And in that template here, I want to start by outputting a list of dummy learning resources. Later, the user will be able to add his or her own ones, but we'll start with some dummy resources. Hence, we can start by adding an unordered list, and we can, of course, then manage those resources here in the data property of this app.vue file. So we can return our data object here, and then have some stored resources here, for example, which could be an array full of objects, where every object is one learning resource. And in that unordered list, we could use v-for, the v-for directive, to output those stored resources. And that sounds like a good start to me. So I'll start here by populating this with some dummy data, because for the moment we have no way of letting the user generate data. And every learning resource should have an ID. For example, because we need that ID to add a key when we use v-for, but an ID will also be helpful when we later add functionality to delete resources. I'll have the official guide as an ID. You can use any string you want here. And then let's say every resource should have a title. Official guide. Because the official guide, the official documentation, of course, is a learning resource you want to keep around when diving into Vue. We can then add a description, because I also want to output a short description of the resource on the screen. And that description here could be the official Vue.js documentation. And last but not least, I'll add another field here, let's say a link property, which is the link to that documentation, which is vue.js.org. Now that's my first resource with which I want to start. I'll also add a second resource here, and that second resource is Google, because Google is super important if you're learning anything. Because you need to learn to Google. There you will find all the resources you could possibly want. Okay, now we got two dummy resources here, and now we can output them here in our unordered list. And I'm fully aware that this is quite a bit away from the final app we want to build, but we can simply get there step by step by adding feature after feature. So feel free to now output those resources on your own in list items, and potentially also consider creating a separate component for every list item. We'll do that together in the next lecture.